It's been just over a year since I got my hands on the 33 and the 18mm f1.4 primes, and after over 12 months of daily use, I'm finally in a position where I can share my long-term thoughts and opinions on whether these lenses are worth it or not. Also, this video is sponsored by MPB, but more on them later on. Prior to these lenses, I owned and loved my f2 primes. I loved how small, compact and light they were. The f2 aperture never really bothered me because I didn't really shoot in low light back then. However, over time I found myself being drawn more into low light and nighttime photography, and I started to hit an issue where the f2 aperture just wasn't open enough for me because I couldn't really reduce the shutter speed down anymore. I couldn't really increase the ISO any higher. So the next logical step for me was to open up the aperture and look at the f1.4 primes. On top of that, even though the autofocus on the f2 versions was great for photography, for video it did lack a little bit. So when Fuji released the new 33 and the 18mm prime lenses with f1.4 aperture, sharper glass, and most importantly for me, the linear motor focusing, for me was a no-brainer to jump over and give them a go. Now, why specifically 18mm and 33mm? So full frame terms, a 28 and a 50. Well, in my experience, the 18mm will serve as your establishing lens as well as your environmental portrait lens, and even for some landscapes it's great, whereas the 33mm will be your subject lens, will be your street photography lens, and it'll be your more traditional portrait lens. So between these two, you're pretty much covered. If you are coming over from the f2 primes or even the f2.8 pancake lenses, then these will definitely take you by surprise because they are noticeably bigger and heavier. However, if you've been used to using zoom lenses like the 16 to 55, then these will definitely feel like a breath of fresh air. On a medium-sized body like a Fuji X-T4 or X-T5, these will feel perfect. On a bigger body like the XH2, you won't even notice that they're there. However, if you want to use them on a smaller body like an XE4 or maybe the XS10, then they might feel a little bit front heavy. Size-wise, you will notice a little bit of a difference, especially if you're putting your lenses into a small sling. So for example, I use a Peak Design 3-litre sling. When I used to have the f2 lenses, I could fit like 3 or 4 of them in the sling with the camera and still have room to spare. However, with these, I can just have the 18mm, let's say, on the camera in the main compartment, and 33mm will sit in a little side compartment. Doesn't leave that much more room either. Overall, I've not actually experienced any reliability issues with these lenses, and I've used them in every possible scenario. They've been soaked, frozen, covered in sand, and I'm pleased to say that the weather sealing has held up. In terms of body wear, there are definitely signs of use that you can see around the lens, especially on the edges and on the teeth on the aperture ring. As for the glass, it doesn't have any scratches or marks, and I personally never use any filters, and now and again I'll even clean it with my t-shirt if I don't have a lens cloth handy. Also, the little mark that you're seeing right now is from when I walked into a lamppost. The only thing I can't comment on is how well or not well they bounce because I've not dropped them yet. The one complaint I do have, and this is something that I've mentioned in my initial impression videos, is that the build quality when you compare the two is slightly different. Now, I don't know whether it's done on purpose or maybe it's because the consistency is not as good, but the aperture ring and the focus ring on the 33mm feels very good. It's tight, it's solid, you feel the clicks. On the 18mm, on the other hand, it's a lot more loose, a lot looser, whatever the correct way of saying it is. And you can even accidentally knock the aperture ring just by holding the lens in your hand or having it in your bag. Many times I've done that. Now, you'd think that for two lenses within the same kind of group, the same category, the same kind of price point, that the two things will be the same, a bit like on the f2.8 zooms. The aperture ring across the two will be the same, but for some reason, it's not. Now, I thought it was just me. I checked other lenses, they were the same. So for me, it's a bit of a negative because when you're spending this much money, at least you want to get the same consistent feeling between the aperture rings. Certainly on the 18mm, I don't want to be taking it out of my bag every time and noticing it at f16 when I left it at f2. For example. Now, this is not a deal breaker to me, it's just something that I've noticed. Overall, it doesn't really hinder how I use this lens. I just have to keep an eye on the aperture ring whenever I take the camera in and out of the bag. Oh, and one more little thing. Now, I think this is just a characteristic of linear motor lenses because they all seem to do it. However, these, when the lens is not on the camera or the camera is switched off, if you listen, so basically the element kind of moves around inside. On the 33, it's not too bad, but on the 18, like, it's proper loud. And I've had people message me saying, I've just bought this lens, it makes this racket, is it broken? Does yours do the same? So again, it's not a negative, but it's just something that I've picked up on, and obviously other people have picked up on as well. Image quality for me is the standout feature when it comes to these two lenses. They are incredibly tack sharp, and the photos that they produce are just outstanding. The detail, the color rendering, tonality, and just the overall look and feel of the images coming out of these lenses is, in my opinion, superb. Moving over to autofocus, and the linear motor upgrades, in my opinion, are noticeable straight away over any previous prime lens. Put simply, for video, these lenses now actually work and actually properly focus on me or any subject that I am pointing the camera at. For photography, they're also very good, even when paired with some of the older bodies. Now, I know this section is a little bit thin because I've not been pointing the camera at brick walls or walking towards the lens all the time, but honestly, these lenses are very good. There's nothing else I can say apart from the fact that the autofocus works as it should and the image quality is outstanding. That's all you need to know. At this point, I would like to thank the sponsor of this video, MPB. If you're watching this and you would like to pick one of these lenses up, then may I recommend buying used from MPB. They are the world's largest global platform for buying and selling used gear. By buying used, you will save on average a third of the price compared to new. More importantly, by buying used, you're participating in a sustainable circular economy. So if you're in the market for one of these f1.4 primes or even the smaller f2 versions, may I suggest picking them up from MPB, saving yourself money and buying more sustainably. Thank you for watching the segment, and thank you to MPB for sponsoring. Now, if you're wondering whether you should upgrade to these f1.4 primes from the f2 versions, or if you're just buying from scratch, do you go for the f2 or the f1.4? This section should help you a little bit. Now, are you shooting at night? If most of your photography is during the day, honestly, the f2 primes are great. However, if you plan to shoot more at nighttime or in other low light situations, may I suggest looking at f1.4 because the difference is noticeable. Secondly, are you going to be using these lenses for video? Because if you are, then the f2 primes are not going to be as good in terms of autofocus compared to the f1.4. So if you're relying on autofocus all the time and you'll be doing loads of video, again, I would look at the f1.4. Finally, is do you travel a lot and do you travel light? If you need to fit all your gear into a very small pouch, or maybe you even want to put your lenses in your pocket, then the f2 primes are probably the only sensible choice here because they just take up so much less room compared to the f1.4s. So as you can see, there's a trade-off between which one you get. For me personally, I'm obviously sticking with the f1.4 primes because I now have a system that works for me and I am shooting at night more and more frequently, not to mention using them for video. But for you, it might be different. So give it a go, see what you think, and let me know in the comments which one have you got and why did you get it. Okay, that is all from me. I hope this video has been useful. I hope it's answered a few questions. So until next time, have a good day, have a good week, and see you soon. Bye.